For folks who've never experienced a wind-driven wildfire up close and personal, I think it's difficult sometimes to get a sense of scale regarding the real enormity of the dynamics of this sort of event. I think there's a perception in many cases that a wildfire sort of progresses contiguously and linearly across the landscape, some wall of flames that moves from point A to point B. And what we see during these extreme wind-driven fires, like occurred in the LA basin recently, are that it's not generally this contiguous wall of flame, but it is this essentially a snowstorm of billions of hot embers raining down, blowing horizontally. And there's remarkable footage of this from folks on the ground as the disaster was unfolding. And so the challenge is that...
By the way, I'm imaging that in my head, billions of embers.
Billions upon billions.
And the faster the wind speed, the heavier is the ember that it can send airborne.
Imagine if you were in a blizzard, except that instead of snowflakes, all of them were embers. And instead of 40-mile-an-hour winds, it was, in some cases, 100 miles an hour. Okay. And that's what you're up against.
That's crazy. So tell me about fire suppression with helicopters. How well does that work?
And we've actually seen some very good early stops and successes on other fires that didn't become disastrous in the same week. But the challenge is that you can't operate those aircraft when it's extremely windy. So under the very most dire fire weather conditions is when the suppression tactics we have available become the least effective.
That's bad.
Obviously, the reason why there was such a disaster in LA County last week is not just because of the recent weather conditions. It's not just because of climate change. It's not just because people live in the high-risk zones. There's all of these factors are at play. And the reality is, in a lot of fire-prone parts of the U.S., and this is not just true in LA, but throughout California and, frankly, all around the country, we don't build individual structures or neighborhoods to be fire resilient, certainly not as much as we could and probably should be doing. So there is a lot you can do.
And if you did, and the insurance company reflected that in your rates versus other people's rates, that would be quite a force operating on people's rebuilding plans.
Yes, and I really, folks sometimes say, now is not the time to discuss the causes of the disaster as people are still suffering, but people are also making decisions about what to do next, and that includes where and how to rebuild. And so we should be having those conversations now so we don't make the same mistakes that we made that allowed this